If you aren't getting called into interviews, let's talk about the 10 ways that you can write a high caliber cover letter that is impossible to ignore. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. Tip number 1 is to ease the burden on the reader. This idea really resonated with me when I read the book Writing for Busy Readers. It really highlights that the onus is on the writer to communicate clearly in order for a busy reader to be able to understand what it is that you are trying to communicate. And there is perhaps no one that is more busy than a recruiter that is wading through potentially hundreds of applications for a job that they need to fill in a timely manner. So make sure that when you are crafting your cover letter, you keep in mind that your reader is busy and the onus is on you to communicate clearly. Tip number 2 is to connect the narrative. Just because you understand why your skills and your experience is relevant to the role doesn't mean that the recruiter on the other end of your job application does. You need to connect the narrative in your career, particularly in your cover letter. Your resume is going to have a lot of information in it, and you want to make sure that your cover letter is the place where all of that is packaged up in a way that is compelling to the reader. You want to make sure that your cover letter makes sense of your resume to match what the organization is looking for in a role. But when you are building your narrative, keep in mind tip number 3, which is to have every word in its place in your cover letter. There is the saying, I would have written a shorter letter if I'd had more time. I remember reading Seth Godin, who, if you're not familiar with him, is an expert in the marketing space, address how long he thinks a blog should be. And he was saying that it should be however long it needs to be. So that might mean that it needs less words, that might mean that it needs more words. So don't set yourself these arbitrary limits in terms of what your word count needs to be. You might have a range in mind, but don't feel like you have to have more information in there just for the sake of filling out the page, or less just because you want to keep it really short. The more important thing is to communicate the messages that are most going to align with what the job is asking for. If every word has to earn its place in your cover letter, then what word should you choose? That leads to tip number 4, which is to match the language in your job. A job ad or a job description that they might have along with a role is your blueprint for what to include in your cover letter. Particularly in the job ad, they are highlighting what they are prioritizing most. And your job description might have further elements of that which are really important, like essential criteria, for example. What I would recommend doing is to take your job ad and to copy that into a document and highlight what is most important in there. You often find this in the dot points that they include in what they're looking for in a role. So not just the roles and responsibilities, but what they really highlight they're looking for in the ideal candidate. And you also find this in some of the opening paragraphs. So keep in mind that they are prioritizing the information that they are putting in those areas. So when you highlight those areas, you're making that really clear to yourself amongst all of the other information in a job description or a job ad as to what to focus on. So go through the job description as well and either copy and paste that into a document or highlight through the document that they have provided and have that up next to you. So when you are writing your cover letter, you are linking back to that language. For example, you might have skills, experience, examples that you already have in mind that you want to include. You know that that is relevant for the role. But linking back to the language that you see in a job ad and in a cover letter is going to help you to frame those examples and those capabilities in a way that resonates with the organization. You're using the language that resonates with them. You're packaging up those examples in a compelling way. And the thing about the job ads in particular is that they usually have already compelling language throughout it. And as employer branding gets more and more important, this is becoming more and more engaging. So if you go through that and you notice things that you find resonate with you because they're not the normal way that people might say things, or they feel really unique to that organization, then you can infuse some of those words, some of those phrases into your cover letter. But your cover letter is about much more than the language that you use. It's also about tip number 5, which is to add evidence to your claims. Now, if you are matching the language of a job description and you are matching the language of a job ad, it can start to just feel like you are making vague claims and you are just communicating as though you are writing a job ad or writing a job description. This will sound too generic if you just do this on its own. You need to add evidence to your claims. This is where the examples that you put in regarding your work experience are going to be really important. Now, a lot of people will put in the examples that are quite obvious, like where you have worked, the number of years that you have worked in those organizations, for example, the titles that you have. But what is really going to elevate your cover letter is adding examples. For example, if you make a particular claim about having a certain capability, then what is an example that you can include to talk to that skill set? And you're going to want to prioritize what the job ad is prioritizing, or the job description, when you are picking these examples and when you are picking the skills that you are highlighting through your resume. So you might like to frame your example using the STAR method, which is talking about the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And you can do this in a really succinct way, but it can add a lot of impact to the evidence that you are adding to your cover letter. The other thing that will increase the impact of your cover letter is tip number 6, which is to add numbers. Numbers adds weight to the evidence that you are including through your cover letter. So if you have, for example, worked on a particular project, what was the budget of that project? If you were a leader, what was the team that you looked after? How many people were in that team? What is the revenue of the organization that you are helping to drive sales for, or your sales budget? What are the numbers that you can add to the claims that you are making in your cover letter? What makes numbers more compelling to add to your cover letter as well is that it gives the reader something for the eyes to be able to land on. So if your reader is already looking to just skim your cover letter, you're pointing them in the direction of what it is that you want them to see, and your numbers will help you to do that. People are naturally drawn to that sort of information as opposed to big blocks of text or wordy sentences. They want to see that what they are looking for can stand out straight away. So numbers will help you to elevate the impact of your cover letter. But they might not even get to any of that if you don't use tip number 7, which is to have a hook. You want to make sure that the first sentence of your cover letter is going to convince a recruiter to keep reading. So just like in any good copywriting, how are you drawing them into the rest of your communication? You're communicating upfront why you're the best person to fill that role. Some of the key things that you want to be able to infuse into the hook of your cover letter are your years of experience, your skills, potentially the industries that you have worked across. And if you can do this, try and include the results or the transformation state that you are able to drive as a part of having those skills and those experiences, just to add a little bit more of that impact to the hook and why those skills are relevant. So you're answering the question, so what? Why do those things matter? all in that first sentence. Which actually leads me to tip number 8, which is to tell a transformation story. It's important to have the transformation state in mind throughout your cover letter in various sections of your cover letter. This is where you're not just talking about your skills and capabilities, as I mentioned in regards to your hook. You're talking about what that achieves for an organization. You're talking about that impact. You're making that really obvious to the reader. The idea of a transformation state is something that resonated with me when I read the book Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. This is one of my favorite frameworks. It's a 7-part framework, and you don't need to follow it to a T, but the ideas in this framework, and if you have this in mind, will really help you to write a compelling cover letter and tick some very important boxes. So in the framework, this starts with a character, and the character is not you. The character is the hero in the story, the other person who you are helping to serve. The character has a problem. So think of this as your recruiter who is trying to solve a particular problem for an organization. They're trying to fill a vacancy. They meet a guide. That is where you come in, and you have a couple of very important attributes. You have authority and you have empathy. You also have a plan. You call them to action. You show them what failure looks like, and you show them what success looks like. Now, you might potentially find following that to a T a little bit too confusing when you are writing your cover letter, but try and keep those ideas in mind. Keep the idea that your recruiter is solving a problem in mind. Keep the idea that you need to convey your authority and your empathy. Even in regards to having a plan, that might be where your skill set gets infused into how it is that your actions have led to particular result. In regards to having a call to action, you need to make sure at the end of your cover letter that you are inviting that person to call you. So you're putting your number at the end of your cover letter. You're saying things at the end of your cover letter like, I can be contacted on your number at your convenience. So you're giving them a call to action like any good copywriting would do. But why I'm highlighting this model is because of the importance of the transformation state. And you can integrate this through various parts of your cover letter. For example, as I mentioned, it might be a part of your hook. It might be the way that you end the opening paragraph of your cover letter. It could be infused into the final paragraph of your cover letter, and it could also be how you finish the examples that you are providing in your cover letter as well. But even after all of this, it's not enough to just tick all of the technical boxes, which leads to tip number 9, which is to show that you are a cultural fit. The person who is recruiting for a role doesn't just want to know that you can fill all of the skills that they are looking for. They don't just want to see that you have relevant experience. They want to know themselves and for the teams that they are representing that you are someone that they actually want to work with. So that needs to come across in your cover letter. You need to show that you are a cultural fit for the organization. Indicate that you're actually a good person to work with. They're actually going to want to be in the office with you, for example. And another way that you can highlight that you're a good cultural fit is to infuse some of their key language relating to their values, their mission statement, their vision, through your cover letter. And if you're not confident in doing this throughout your cover letter, then make sure that it is at least addressed at the end of your cover letter. Show that you know what the values are or the vision or the mission of the organization, and infuse that language into some key areas of your cover letter. And at the very least, this shows that you have done at least a little bit of research into the organization, or you have at least indicated that a values alignment is important to you, even if it was just written in the job description. You're showing that you noticed these things and you are highlighting that. Through your cover letter as well, while we are on that topic, you want to make sure that it doesn't feel like it has been written for any job, and it's not just a generic cover letter. So doing things like referring to the organization, referring to the position specifically as it is titled, will also help you to communicate that this is a customized cover letter, that it is a job that you actually want to apply for, and you're not just sending out lots of cover letters. And as I mentioned, your personality is important in your cover letter. So that leads to tip number 10, which is to add your character through your resume. This is not where you need to go into a lot of fluffy statements about the soft skills that you bring to an organization. This is just where you can make tiny transitions or use little phrases that indicate that you are bringing something unique to the role. So you don't want to just completely copy what a job description or a job ad has said. It will sound like you are just parroting whatever it is that they are saying. But when you can bring in your own unique personality just through little things that you include in your cover letter, then you're able to communicate the unique impact that you can have to a role. You're able to communicate the personal philosophies or the mindset that you bring to a role, or your skill set or your profession. And you can highlight why you are unique compared to the other candidates, because the other candidates might also be mirroring the language that is in the job description. But if you can add more of your personality or a little bit more of your storytelling in a captivating way, then that is going to help you to stand out to recruiters. For more tips on why you might not be getting interviews, then check out my previous episode on the 10 tiny mistakes that you could be making in your resume. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.